Welcome to Unlearn, where we talk to industry leaders about unlearning how we go to market.
I'm Kelly Sarabin, and I run Tech Partner Enablement and Advocacy at HubSpot.
And I'm Asher Matthew, co-founder of Partnership Leaders.
The old ways of going to market are getting more expensive and less effective.
To thrive in an era of digital transformation, you have to go to market differently. Let's find out how. Hey, everybody. We're back for another session of the Unlearn podcast. And today, we have a guest who you may not all know for partnerships, but you are going to be surprised to learn about his career in and / with partnerships. So, Bruce, do you want to just give us a little bit of info about yourself before we dive straight in?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the tech industry for about 40 plus years. Recently retired, actually, but began my career with a small little startup of a few people called Oracle. It was on a private company at the time on Sand Hill Road. And I'll come back to that location in a second because it plays an interesting role. I worked for a guy named Tom Siebel, who became a pretty well-known icon in the technology industry as his sales engineer. So that means doing the demos, et cetera. So I did that for about 5 years, and I ended up running the Unix division of Oracle, which was organized by operating system at the time. It's no longer organized that way, but it was back in the early 80s. And from there, went on to run an engineering division of Apple for 5 years. And then I rejoined Tom in 1996 for when he built a new company called Siebel Systems, which I think still holds the record for fastest growing company in U.S. history. We went from when I joined of about 2 million in revenue. 4.5 years later, we were 2 billion in revenue, and created the CRM category, which we then sold Siebel off about 10 years later to Oracle, and kind of ceded that category to Salesforce. But Tom and our team actually were the ones that began enterprise level CRM. And from there, I decided to try something different. I tried venture capital for about 15 years. I was the first investor in an idea that became a company called Marketo. I was one of the original investors in Workday, Velocity, which is recently acquired by Salesforce, all B2B software as a service companies. I didn't really know much about venture capital. I'm not sure I still I do now, but I thought it'd be interesting to learn, so I made a number of all B2B SaaS investments and did pretty well with them. Ended up leaving Interwest and creating a new venture firm called Wildcat. And while I was there, I wrote a book called Traversing the Traction Gap, which I teach at Stanford and Harvard and Columbia and a few other schools from time to time when I'm invited. So did all that, and then a few years ago decided that I was going to end my career, and I wanted to figure out, well, how am I going to do that? And I was a personal investor and a professional investor in Tom Siebel's new company called C3 AI. And I called them up and I said, look, I'm only going to work a couple more years. The company's not public yet. Is there a role for me? I thought maybe a little product guy or something. I don't know what. And Tom said, well, why don't you come and be my chief marketing officer, since you did that also at Siebel Systems. And we need it because we need to take this company public and we need to build a new category called enterprise AI. So I joined, and a year or so later, we took the company public in December of 2020. I agreed I would stay another year. I did. I found my replacement and sailed off into the sunset, so to speak, to do some different things. So that's kind of the story of who I am and what I've done. Kind of an eclectic set of things.
Super. And I'm sure we'll come back to the different pieces of your journey, but we always start this podcast with what's top of mind for you? Yeah.
Well, I think top of mind for anybody in tech right now is obviously AI, from both its ethical issues and, worries to how are we going to completely change over the sales, the entire work organization and replace it with machine learning algorithms and robotic characters, or exactly how is this going to play out? And I think everybody gets worried when new technologies are introduced that have such dramatic impact, such a dramatic impact on society, et cetera. So I think we're in a natural evolution state, and I read a lot about what's going on there. I think it's pretty interesting. If I were at the beginning of my career again, it's certainly an area that I would spend a significant amount time on. And I also worry about the social issues that are associated with this, given that most of the predictions are based upon a corpus of data that has occurred previously.
Yep.
And if that data is, if you think about it, if you're going to use it for HR, that's probably a bad use of AI, because it's going to basically make recommendations on things that have been done in the past, which may not be good. If you're going to use it to solve predictive maintenance problems, it's probably a pretty good use of AI. So
Yeah.
I think we're gonna go through, just like we've learned with social media, or not learned. You can debate whether we've done a good job with that.
Or learned but not actioned.
Yeah.
As it may be.
So you can debate whether that's been a good thing or a bad thing. But I think with AI, we're going to find that it's going to be a combination of the two, just like we found with social media.
Yeah, and when you say with HR, you have concerns. What specifically are your concerns compared to the current process? One thing you hear a lot, right, about candidates who don't come in through a personal network is there's this whole thing of trying to game the ATS, or like they have certain keywords. You even have people who charge to say, hey, I'll write your resume in a way that can get past the reader. Now, is that an efficient system? Probably not. Is it possible that AI would do a better job of identifying good candidates than what we have now?
Well, I think it's a great question. The issue is HR is a pretty inefficient. The hiring and the recruiting and hiring people is a pretty inefficient market. Even in spite of things like Indeed.com and Glassdoor and a bunch of other technologies that have emerged, as you said, all through these ATSs and others. The problem is that it's the nuances of the candidate. There are things on paper that look amazing, but when you interview them, you realize it's not going to be a great cultural fit. And it's hard to test for cultural fit. I suppose you could have somebody answer a bunch of questions, they could read it off, and you could have a chat GPT look at it and
analyze the personality.
Yeah. I just think it's a human thing, and we connect with people. Maybe I'll be wrong on this, but I think we connect better human to human. I know that a lot of people like to date meme to meme, but I think it works better if we actually meet the person who we're supposedly going to date. So I do think it's
but most people meet through online dating now, right? Like I think most marriages come from online dating at this stage. Yeah, and I agree with you. There's an incredible amount of inefficiency in HR, perhaps in the dating world as well. But you're saying you don't think you think that technology is not a save, that actually more human-to-human interaction would make it more efficient?
I think that it could help. I think that having something that could actually go through and maybe screen out the ones that for sure aren't going to be a good fit. But I think finding the fit is still a human, still requires human intervention. So and then of course you've got to screen out bias. So we don't do the world's greatest job today with that, but we certainly, if we just relied upon decisions that were made historically for hiring, we would then create machine learning that would hire, old white men. So I think that I don't think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Isn't that the problem with cultural fit from human to human, though, too, right? Like people have a human nature to like people who are like themselves. And so you're doing the interview and you're saying, oh, well, it was a good cultural fit. I just related to this person. I felt that connection. Isn't that a tough for bringing in diverse perspectives or backgrounds?
When I say cultural, I mean, from the standpoint of a business, will they fit into the work culture of this company? Not whether I think this is going to be my beer buddy, right? So I think that for the most part, we can do that. I think we are getting better. Corporate. We're getting a little better. At least we're acknowledging that the sins of the past. We're by no means perfect. So I think we have a lot of room to improve. But I think just simply taking a bunch of algorithms and having them go out and do the assessments and whether this person's is a great person for our company, I think it still requires the human touch. We'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think we're there now. Like I don't think at least I haven't seen any tooling that would even be able to approximately do that. It's definitely more of a future state. But I think it's an interesting question whether they could do a better job, because humans, as we all know, have a bunch of logical fallacies and biases baked into how we think. Some of them which are ultimately for survival modes, but in certain cases can lead to poor decisions.
Yeah, I've had several thousand people who've worked for me over the years, and I've always done better by hiring pretty diverse teams. Whether it was mandated or not mandated, it just turned out to be a very successful strategy for me. So, you know, uh, this topic is above my pay grade. It's not, so,
Let's go back to
by no
marketing,
means.
but
That's okay though. You're retired now. You should feel free to
you
opine on
can talk about
everything.
anything.
You don't have to worry about being canceled.
Yeah, exactly.
And we do the Unlearn episodes primarily for our own enjoyment more than anything else. But so as you guys were talking about this thing, right? Like, there's a bunch of debate around the valley or around in tech. Like, are when you go to work, are you going into a family culture, or are you going to like this is like a rigorous machine culture, right? And there are both models work, right? It's not like they don't work, right? And like Salesforce would be one example of the HANA culture, and then Amazon would be another example of where frugality and just getting your stuff done actually really matters, right? And and as you guys were talking about this, if you use the power of AI now to go technically scrape all of the data about people that's publicly available, I'm pretty sure you can actually just come to patterns and say, like, look, this person's values based on what they have shown to the world actually match the company's values. And so at least there's a value alignment. They may or may not be a personality alignment.
Yeah, I think that we tend to lie.
Okay.
On those things. I think well, let's put it this way. We may exaggerate.
Okay.
And we know what we're writing. We know the audience we're writing to. It's just like when I wrote my book, I knew who I was writing to.
Yep.
So I wrote in those terms, using language vernacular that I knew people would understand and concepts that people would understand. When I'm writing a resume, I'm writing the same way. I know it's going to be scanned. I know it's going to be read by an HR person. I know the job that I'm trying to seek. In fact, I've written different versions of my resume over the years to emphasize one thing over another. In one case, I was emphasizing engineering. In another case, I was emphasizing marketing,
Yep.
etc. And I know most people are pretty savvy. I mean, I think they do this. So that's why I say it does involve the human interaction piece of it. And I've been, for the most part, I think I've been pretty successful hiring people. Not in all cases. There's been some things that just didn't work out for a number of reasons. Maybe they didn't like working for me or with me, so that's a reasonable outcome as well. But for the most part, I think that by me speaking with them and having a chance to kind of talk to them about, here's the culture. Oracle's a pretty tough culture. Siebel Systems was tough. C3AI is tough. It's there's a lot of get work done and work life work home work life balance. That's not part of the deal.
Not a thing.
So, not a thing. So and I mean, as Tom would say at C3I, there was no work from home. There is no work from home policy. Never has been. I mean, we were back in the office the second it was legally allowed. And Tom's comment about it was pretty straightforward. He just said, look, we're inventing stuff that's never been invented before. It's really hard to do that over a Zoom call. We need people who can get on a whiteboard and draw it out and come up with new ideas and do it really quickly. You can do some of it, that's for sure, remotely. And we did when we were legally required to do so. But I don't think we could have we decided to execute the IPO in August of 2020, and we IPO'd in December. That work meant 7 days a week, 14 hours a day of writing an S1 and doing all the legal work. There's just no way you could have done that from home. So that's not a culture for everybody, and we especially in marketing, when I was hiring for marketing people, they said, what do you mean we have to be in the office 5 days a week? And I said, that's how we work here. And if you definitely should not work here, if that's something that's that you don't want to do. So that's kind of what I mean.
Do you think that's that culture will have a better output, or do you think it's just a matter of preference, and that a more friendly work-life balance over time, obviously, if you're talking about like a 1 month period, that would probably have a higher output. But over time, right, the argument is that people end up getting burned out. You end up seeing more churn. People get disgruntled. Do you think that that culture will have higher output as long as you are good at finding the people who thrive in that culture?
Well, I can only point to the 3 companies I've been personally involved in: Oracle, Siebel Systems, and C3I. I would suggest those 3 companies have been pretty successful. Um, Tom definitely has a point of view on culture and how it works. He wants people to be curious. I think he says carry a book in your hand. Read. Be intellectually interested in what you're doing, and like to work with others, like to be together with other people and do it. And that's not everybody. So I can only point. I think we did pretty well at Oracle to build a pretty good company. Tough environment. You make your number and you get to stay, and you don't make your number, you're gone. There's not a lot of. I think it's probably still true with Ellison still there and Safra. For sure, it was at Siebel Systems. We had OKRs. They were called MBOs back then. OKRs that we were required. You didn't make your OKRs, you didn't get paid a bonus, and you probably lost your job. And everybody knew that, but that also attracted people. Not the funny part, it didn't attract a lot of people from Stanford, but it did attract a lot of people from Harvard. So the East Coast kind of culture, which is a little more in your face kind of a culture. We wore suits, that wasn't a thing, at the time. You don't wear suits at C3 anymore, but we did back then. And that did not fit into, a lot of people's idea of a great time. So, but I talk to people still, who work for me for many years there, or I worked with them. And they all look back fondly at Siebel because we won. We won deals. We met our numbers. I did 52 quarters that every one of them was really hard. And, and a lot of people helped us to do that were along for the ride. So it fit for them. It worked for them. I had gone to, I went to West Point, and so for me, I didn't graduate. I left early to pursue computer science, which at the time wasn't really a thing, and not at the academy anyway. And so I hired a lot of West Point, Navy, and other grads who had also gone on to a business school. And the thing that really worked for them is you're used to not whining about a lot of things when you're in the military.
Yep.
So the thing I liked about it was I didn't get anybody whining about how many hours we had to work and, the tough duty that it was. And, it worked out pretty well. Well, not every case, but for the most part it did. So I would say that the cultural part, different people and different companies have been very successful without that strategy. I mean, yeah, like with Salesforce, I think it's I think it's, if you're inside the company, I think they would say it's a little tougher than, maybe how it appears on the outside, where Mark's kind of a big, fuzzy bear. Inside, it's a little different.
I think there's the marketing of the culture and then the actual culture are often two different things.
There you go. Yeah. Still they've done phenomenally well. Mark's a different guy. He learned a lot from Larry at Oracle. He took on some of those characteristics and rejected some of the others, just like Tom did or I did, et cetera. So I think, the culture comes from the top. I think you can look to the CEO and decide is the culture that they've established their accountability or no accountability or whatever, whether you like it or not. We can look at Twitter as a prime example of what, recently a company that people are pretty familiar with because obviously we use it and it's a B2C company. But we can see how Elon Musk has run it versus, the prior set of CEOs. And you could argue, well, is it more or less successful? Well, maybe more in some ways and less in others. So I think culture is really super important. And I think it's part of, I think it's up to the CEO to set the tone of what the culture is, and then to hold people accountable for enforcing it, and living up to it, and making sure that when they hire people, that they hire people who are really going to fit in and like working there, and it fits them. If they need work-life balance, and that's kind of a key thing of the company, and they can achieve that, then that's great. I think if you have happy people, then I think you can be very productive. They'll tend to work when they're not actually even required to work. My career was 40 years of 24/7, and working from vacations were working from nice places, but that's not everybody's cup of tea, and not everybody wants to do that stuff. So it worked for me. It doesn't necessarily have to work for anyone else.
So I just have to ask, if you were working 24/7 when you retired, have you found something else to essentially be working on 24/7, or have you actually been able to change your pace, to change your pace of life?
So it's funny that you bring it up. So while over my career, I learned how to fly, because I like the physical and mental aspects of that. Learned how to sail. In fact, my wife and I sailed for 2 years. It took a sabbatical, and we sailed from Sausalito to the East Coast and lived in the Caribbean. So I learned how to do that.
Nice.
And I learned something from those processes, which is that I need to be intellectually stimulated and have something physical with it. So what I'm doing now is I'm racing cars. So I've gone through several different programs, passed them, got my license, several licenses, and I'm participating in 2 different international racing programs on 2 different teams, and so that has been a big learning curve. It's one of the more difficult sports I've ever done. I think it's kind of like golf, where it looks easy when you see other people do it. And then you go out and do it, and you never perfect it. The pros are always so much better than you. It's just unbelievable. And I would say that the same thing applies to racing cars. The pro coaches that we work with they're not driving F1 cars, and they smoke all of us amateurs easily. So, and every time you get a particular turn down or course down correct, you might do in a lap that's pretty good, and then you blow it the next time. It's a frustratingly technical sport, and I really like it. I'm learning a lot from it, and I knew that I needed to have something like that in my life to replace that other piece. And then the other part I'll be doing as I kind of wind this off a little bit. I kind of overindulged in the racing thing this year. It's every couple of weeks I'm in some kind of a race. So next year, though, I hope to take the book that I wrote, the Traversing the Traction Gap, which has become pretty popular, more popular than I thought it was going to be. And I'm thinking about turning into an online course, set of online courses, consulting, and a few other things. A lot of people have reached out to me to do it. I advise a couple of companies. That's all I have time for right now. But if I can take it and actually turn it into a practicum where you can read the book, that's great. But that you can actually augment all of that with specific use cases, interviews, etc. I think it'll become even more useful to entrepreneurs. So that's kind of what's in my mind for 2024. We'll see how I do with the racing thing. I reserve the right to push it out a year.
I guess we'll start talking about AI and HR, because I want to know a little bit more about what the future of go-to-market and what you think go-to-market leaders need to know. But the one comment I'll make is, like, I think one of the fascinating applications of AI around the HR is like how to actually know when an employee is getting disengaged or disconnected, so you help them faster than before they just go on the other side, because we spend so much time in recruiting and ramping, and everybody's kind of going through their emotions in their lives as well, right? But if you just know, then there's a way, I'm assuming there's a way to like go reach out and like help the person, or otherwise they're just going to get disconnected and eventually leave.
Yeah, well, one way that we did it, because at C3AI, because Tom and the rest of us were worried about productivity of people and whether they're engaged or not. You can agree or disagree with what we decided to do, but we decided to use Jira as a way to record the performance of people. And I know that's a way of like quantitatively assessing people. So every day you would fill out, we actually, my team, we built an application out of Jira that would allow you to input what did you get done that day? What did you get done the week? And then we just basically wrote a report that pulled that information off the cards and generated saying, here's all the things that I accomplished for the week. You can say, well, that's micromanaging people. And in some sense it is, but in another sense, it wasn't really designed to micromanage. It was really around the point of, hey, there's a lot of work that has to get done. Are you getting it done so we can meet on Monday and go through where we stand on this particular project? And I knew at a glance, I could see what everybody was working on. Well, it's pretty simple to see when people aren't doing anything or submitting in the cards. And again, it wasn't meant to be this overly burdensome thing. In fact, I tried to make it pretty simple for people to do the tracking. And at the end, you could tell where people would say, look, I'm not into it, or I don't feel like, I don't feel like doing these things, et cetera. Well, okay, well, maybe it's not a good fit, or you're not, do you want a different work assignment? Do you want to work on something else? So that's one way to do it. And that's more of the, that's kind of the time card approach to management, which I think is okay. It's useful to some extent, but the more important part of that is we'll go back to the human to human interaction, which is, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Looks like you're not getting a lot of things done that we need done in the group. Is there a reason for that? Is like something going on at home? Are you everything okay? No, it turns out that my kids have COVID or whatever. You find out it gives you early warning signals of things that are hard, where we could say, okay, fine, why don't you just take time off? Just go ahead and go. It's more important.
Just come back. And I think that's fantastic. And that Jira methodology worked at scale as well?
Well, it did. We had at the time, I know there's probably closer to 1,000 people now there, but
Okay.
there were about 600 there, and it worked really well across the entire. Engineering's easy because there's all epic and stories.
Yes.
And
They're already kind of in that 2-week sprint modality already, right? And I would probably posit that go-to-market team should do the same thing, and the ones that actually do it and treat their stuff like a product. Actually, there's a lot of similarities between the way the two functions work. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did it across all functions in the organization: legal, sales, marketing, service support. Great. And some people did not like it, for a number of reasons. I mean, right?
I wouldn't like it. I'd find it really annoying, and I feel like as an employee, like to have to sit down and do it, it feels like a lack of trust. I do think the more regimented or routine your work is, the easier it seems to both do and to track. I think it gets harder when you're ramping up entirely net new projects, right? And trying to say what's a reasonable output on a given day.
Yeah, I don't think
that seems much trickier.
Kelly, you would not survive as C3, just putting it out there.
I know, I wouldn't survive. I was already fired.
This is my time management, system. Yeah. So every morning I'd wake up and I would write the 8, 10, whatever things that I needed to get done down on this. All I was doing with the Jira app was to basically digitize that. So that way I didn't have to keep writing and crossing off.
And it's actually,
but AI is a solution for this, honestly, because I'm sure you guys have already seen how AI can just summarize any meeting with meeting notes that you've done. I think AI, as long as you're working on a computer, now where it might get tricky is if you're having an in-person meeting on a whiteboard. That AI may, but then again, we could have cameras in those rooms, right? And they analyze the meetings that are live, and I feel like you could tie that system to the system you had, essentially, where the AI essentially creates those notes at the end of every single day, which to me as an employee, I wouldn't mind being monitored in that way, because for me, it's not I don't have any need to not share what I'm doing. It's the fact of having to stop my workflow potentially to go in and quote report on what I'm doing that I don't like. But if AI could do it for me, I think that would be. And I also think, Asher, your point about detecting disengagement, I do think AI could detect it before a human being could detect it, because there's probably very subtle things where it's like, this person was previously engaging in this level of messaging. They were responding to messages within 17 minutes and now it's 9 minutes. And I think humans will catch on to it, like humans can read other humans, but I think AI could potentially flag those even earlier to then have the human conversation to find out if there's something going on.
Yeah, we tried to make the burden of recording this information as simple as possible. So it was a Kanban, and the interface that we used was a a Kanban interface on Jira, so it's just cards. And so you'd write in, need to call so and so today. Need to get review the press release that's coming out, whatever. Meet with the event team that's going to produce the annual conference, that kind of stuff. And then then I just drag and drop at the end. Did I get it done or not? If I didn't, I dragged it into a column that says incomplete. And if it was complete, I dragged it into the complete column. That's it. At the end of the week, I didn't have to write a report. Before, I was having to spend 3 hours on the weekend taking everybody's Word doc or PowerPoint or whatever it was, going through it all, assessing did they get it done, not done. Then I had to write it all up. Then I had to send it in to Tom to say, hey, Tom, here's what we got done as a team. That was annoying.
Yeah.
Once we built the Kanban, it was like I got my Saturdays back. So it was, and to your point, AI would make it even easier. So I think that's why technology can either make our lives better or worse. In this case, I think it can make it far better.
And I'll just just to wrap this part of it, because I definitely want to move to the go-to-market topic. But it's like Bruce, I'm building a company called Partnership Leaders. It's basically a community for partnerships people around the world, right? And we run it the same way that you said. Like on Mondays, we just say, hey, what is the most important thing you're working on? And we don't care. You could be working on 20 things, but we just need to know what are you prioritizing, right? And then on Wednesdays, we all get in a meeting together and celebrate the success or the failures of the last 2 days. And then on Fridays, we just say, were you able to actually finish what you thought you would start? And like, it felt uneasy in the beginning, but we actually made it part of the hiring criteria. And now it works like clockwork. And any one of us, because we're all remote, right? Any of the founders can go in and take a look and see, okay, this person said they were doing this. Now I'm seeing that that's actually not happening. There must be that they're stuck for sure. And I will say after the 3 or 6 months that we've been doing this, it's actually brought people together and the output has just gone way up. And when we say we're going to do this, we actually have gotten to the point that we actually finish what we say on Mondays on Fridays. And then Monday starts another sprint. So I will test with that. This actually works. And that's why I was kind of curious on like, hey, but would it work at scale? Because if you have like 10, 12 people, yes, like it's easy to catch on to people. But if you have 1,000 or 2,000 people, how does that actually work then?
Well, you need managers. And I think you need a more system like he had versus you just having it in Slack where everybody's responding. But I think you can systemize the same principles out. And AI may come along for the rescue to do a lot of the reporting and the analysis, right? Like if they ingest the data of the outcome, they can do the analysis in terms of where people are falling short and where people are succeeding.
Super. All right, let's move.
I think in a remote world, it's like super useful, honestly. Like I think you weren't remote, but I think this could even be more useful in remote because something that companies struggle with is the lack of visibility and transparency with what their remote workers are doing. I remember when Yahoo, like decades ago, was originally very remote, and it turned out like they had people who were working full time, getting decent salaries, literally doing no work because they just had not put in place the systems and processes to monitor at scale what people are doing. And you hear right now this whole trend of overemployment, right? Where a lot of tech people are saying they're getting 2 full-time jobs and just like staggering their schedule. Mm-hmm. I feel like a system like this provides that visibility where you could catch that.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the other topic. So
go to market.
I know you had posted a couple of topics around just partnerships and stuff. Like, do you want to give us a little bit of color on like your experience in partnerships before we move to like what go-to-market leaders need to know for the future?
Sure. So I believe it was 1996, the end of 96, beginning of 97. We began at Siebel to have a lot of companies start calling us about wanting to work with us. And we had no formal way of doing that. I mean, we had a couple of partnerships. We had one with Microsoft, one with Compaq, and one with Accenture, Paul Anderson at the time. Yep. And those were 3 partnerships that Tom had put together. And they had written business plans. Tom had written a business plan with the company. We met with, like, Ecker Pfeiffer was the CEO of Compaq at the time. And we would meet jointly and go through, what we were doing with them, what they were doing with us. And it worked really, really well. And I remember we went to an offsite in Tahoe, and Tom said, he goes, "Hey, Cleveland, we need a partnership. We need a partnership program. Go build one. I go, I have no idea how to do that. What do you? I've been the victim of partnerships, but I've never built one. Why me? Because you're the least busy. So, well, okay, great. So I went on. I did a bunch of research. I met with people from SAP and Oracle and Microsoft, a lot of other companies. And every time I looked at how they did it, I went, these don't seem very successful. There doesn't seem to be much accountability. I don't want to do that. Are there any examples of partnerships out there that I think work? Well, all I needed to do was look in our own backyard because ours were working really, really well. And so, well, can I codify and formalize the principles that we use there? Yep. So I did, and we put it together in me and a small team of how we would work with companies, writing a business plan, holding. And I told Kelly earlier that we didn't hold our alliance managers responsible for Siebel revenue. We held them responsible for our partners' revenue in the business plan. So that has an amazing result because it makes them wake up every morning worried about the success of whichever partner that they were assigned to. And again, we started with 3 partnerships, but in a couple of years, we had 760 partnerships. And we defined a set of levels about what kind of resources we would provide and what kind they would provide. There was a mandate that they had to create an MDF, a market development fund. And at the strategic level, it needed to be $1 million a year. So it was a pretty significant commitment. And I didn't mean necessarily in kind. I meant like spend money. So then I worked with our marketing team. I said, I need a bunch of programs that partners can buy. So, and you need more money. You don't have any money for demand gen because at the time, Tom was consuming it all for TV ads and, branding. I said, so Pat House was the CMO at the time. I said, Pat, tell me what, can you build me a bunch of programs that I can just swap out the icon or the logo of one partner, put another in, and they can buy these programs that you guys can actually execute at scale. There's a bunch of things, webinars, joint white paper things, a bunch of stuff. And then we productized that in a catalog, a marketing catalog that then our alliance managers went out and sold. So they went and sold spots at different events. They sold, we could only do so many in a quarter. And then the way that I did it, I said, we would match you 50-50. So here's how I'm kind of shady. We'll match you 50-50. And we did. I just happened to mark up every program by 100%. So I had an infinite amount of money. And Pat was really happy because now she had demand gen dollars. They just had to be done with partners. So it was very, very successful. So
what type of partners did you have in this program at that point? Were they services partners, resellers, tech partners, all of the above?
Not really resellers so much. I eventually built a VAR program, but that was separate from this. This was mostly joint go-to-market partners. So they were technology partners, services partners, and so hardware partners, software partners, and services partners. And there were 3 levels. There was base, which is basically, you don't have to commit much and we don't have to commit much, but you can do X, Y, and Z. All well-defined and written down. And then there was a premier partnership, which is a little bit more. We assigned somebody, but it was usually 1 alliance manager to 5 premier partners. At the strategic level, though, we had, like with IBM, we probably had 40 dedicated full-time alliance managers around the world dedicated to that partnership. But we also were driving $1 billion, almost $1 billion of revenue from that partnership, along with Accenture. And when I say that's indirect revenue, it wasn't them reselling our products. It was they found an opportunity. We decided to partner with them. We modified the CRM system so the alliance manager could lock the partner. So we didn't allow the sales organization to decide who they would partner with, because otherwise it just became, hey, we'll take it to the Warriors-Lakers game, and and it became a who would scratch who's back. And I said, no, it's going to be the people. They have to spend a market development fund. They have to do that, and they need to get the leads that come from that particular that program. If the company that we're trying to sell to eventually said, well, I don't want to work with that partner, I want to work with a different partner for consulting. Okay, but the company had to tell us that. Until that point, we demanded, and Tom enforced this, that we worked with the partner who brought us to the prom. So that worked really, really well. again, we won a bunch of awards. Forbes gave us the most, the most successful partnering program they'd ever worked with. I have the little, digital logo, whatever it is, that matters. And then the Strategic Alliance Organization, I work with them. I create a group called the Association of Strategic Alliance Partners, ASAP. Went out and taught them how we did this and why we did it. A lot of people adapted their programs to somewhat mimic this. But for the most part, most CEOs won't do this. They won't invest in this. For Tom, though, he's pretty savvy and shrewd and decided we would overinvest in it because it was so beneficial to the company. And we sucked up all the oxygen in the ecosystem because if you wanted to work with us, you would sign these agreements and work with us, and we would work with you to help generate deal flow for you. And if you didn't work, if you tried to go work with other companies like that, we would excommunicate you out of the partnership program, and you were not able to come and do any of these things with us. So it effectively took all the potential competitors out of the market at the time. Why? Because Accenture didn't want to lose Siebel Systems, which was generating, for every $1 of license revenue, about $10 of consulting revenue. So if they did $1 billion with us in terms of Siebel revenue, that was almost $10 billion for them in consulting services at the time. So it just made a lot of sense, right? It made business sense to them. We were loyal. We didn't really execute them, but we publicly shamed the people who violated in our own organization who didn't follow these rules. And Tom shut them down really, really fast because the sales group, they're well-meaning. They just want to get deals done. They don't really care about your stupid little program inside the company. But it was really important that they did follow the rules, because if they didn't, it would create huge ripples at the executive level. Like, you guys threw us under the bus. We can't trust you, etc. So Tom just nixed all of that, and it was relatively easy for me to enforce. So, and you can read about the program. It's a Harvard business case called Partnering for Success. And while I would say it worked really well for us for what we were trying, I biased it for consulting partners because that's who we needed at the time. If I were to do Salesforce, I wouldn't have done it that way, because you didn't need a bunch of consulting partners, or not nearly as much. And I would have built something different. But that's what we were building it for. And I actually built a new program for Tom at C3, not really using consulting partners, because most of the stuff that C3 can do doesn't require a lot of consulting. It's mostly configuration, and a lot of 90% of it works out of the box. So we actually, if you're trying to build an enterprise AI application, which is what C3 AI's technologies and platform does, if you're trying to build it, we actually dramatically reduce the amount of consulting dollars that a company needs to spend in order to generate that application. Well, that is not in the best interest of Accenture or any of these other companies necessarily, and so it just didn't really make a lot of sense to have it biased for consulting partners. So I say all this in that the framework itself, the approach, which was, well, what's in it for the partner? And I just bucketed them, software, technology, services, whatever, what at different levels, what are they going to get? What are we going to do? We defined it, and we adhered to the policies of the program. And once we did that, like I said, we went from roughly 3 partners in 1997, and 3 years later, we had 760 partners, and I think they worked really well. I can't say that in all cases everybody was happy with us. Salespeople would do stupid things, we would miss on something, whatever. But for the most part, I think it worked pretty well. And what I was commenting on in that LinkedIn article is that most people want to do these paper press releases, and that's the end of the partnership. They don't really invest in the people who they bring on board. I brought on people who had MBAs with some of the top schools to run the partnerships. So they were our best and brightest. They weren't our people who couldn't market or sell products. They were people who were quite clever. And we incentivized them by making them responsible for achieving the revenue objectives, margin objectives, product sales objectives of our partners, as opposed to incentivizing them for Siebel revenue, because I think Kelly pointed out earlier, well, that makes sense because if you achieve their revenue objectives, you're going to achieve your revenue objectives because they're directly correlated.
Yeah, no, agreed. And you made a fantastic point about resourcing, because for the longest time, and it's changed now, like already it's changing now, but for the longest time it was like, if the people don't work in any other function, just send them to partnerships and see if they can work there, right? And that's actually not what innovative companies are doing anymore. Innovative companies are saying, wait a sec, these whiskey, cigar, and steak guys are cool, but they were cool for a different purpose, and we are now moving into, we got to go innovate fast. And if we can innovate with our partners fast, that means we are actually finding hidden pockets of opportunity. And that's actually, at least in my opinion, what the word strategic actually should mean when people say this is a strategic partnership, right?
I agree.
But if you just leave it to salespeople that were, let's call it, rejected from other functions, you're never going to get to unlock the hidden opportunities. And so, but again, there was no place for this type of people to go hang out or connect with other people and best practices. That was kind of the reason why partnership leaders, actually one of the reasons why we started this whole thing. And now there's about 1,500 people that are actually like moving towards understanding that, yes, connections is one piece, but the destination that we need to go to also has to be very clear. And then how do I take that destination and make it personal in this modern world? So it's not just about like sourcing leads and stuff like that. It's important, but like, what are you building towards, right? And so it's a super hot and passionate topic of mine to work with leaders and say, like, if you don't resource well, then it's going to suck anyways, and you're going to kill it anyway. So you already know where you're going to end up with it, and I can tell you to you now, so you don't have to waste like 24 months on it. So I guess, like, as you now are, I mean, you have an immense amount of experience. I feel like we could do 10 podcasts with you and this still may not be enough, right? As you think about like the future that we are gonna go into, and the go-to-market leader actually has like 9, 10, 11, 12 types of go-to-market motions that are sitting at their table, and everybody wants budget, resources, and stuff. Like what do you see? Like what does the future go-to-market leader look like?
Well, I think there's a number of transformations that have occurred. One of the reasons why I also wanted to come back and hold the CMO role, which is what I did at C3, was that a lot of things had changed from the time that I had been a CMO at Siebel Systems. So from 96 through till 2019. I mean, I was the first person, as I said earlier, I had on the drawing board to create a marketing automation product at Siebel that we never got around to because we sold the company to Oracle before we could do it. But on the back of my hand, I said, I think there's ways that we can transform the marketing process that would make it a fundamental part of revenue creation, as opposed to just sort of this party planning and expensing, because everybody would just fire marketing, and that was kind of the first knee-jerk reaction to any type of market downturn, and so I thought that was a pretty stupid idea. But what would we build to do that? Well, I ran into these three people: Phil Fernandez, John Miller, and Dave Morandi, who had an idea. No company at the time, no product at the time. Well, a company, but they didn't have a product. They didn't have customers or revenue, and they couldn't get funded. And the reason they couldn't get funded was because the venture community in general just said, well, marketing is the first thing that gets shot, and they have no budget. And plus, you can't sell on a per seat. The business model sucks because Salesforce can sell a seat to everybody basically in the company, or at least the sales organization, which is huge. And marketing has nobody in it. It has a few people, and they have no budget to buy anyway. So that was all the reasons why not. I said, well, we need to create a new category. We need to redefine. We can call it something different than marketing automation, but if we do, we need to redefine the characteristics of it. So I'm going to get to my point about what's going to happen. So I think that those guys did a great job in category creation or recreation by redefining the role, what marketing automation is, and how it would play a role, and how it would be quantitatively assessed, and how we could do. We now have top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom, right? We have metrics, and we actually track all this stuff, and we can find, from an MQL to an SQL, et cetera. that stuff didn't exist, when
and
when I was
and they made people feel proud of their job. Like I think is a
yeah,
Marketo Nation or Marketing Nation. Like the whole thing was. I mean, at points, people would say this is a cult, but people really felt proud of the work that they did, the impact they were making, the change that they were going through. I remember, I think this is even as early as like 7 years ago. Uh, there were floors in Marketo that if you were not in marketing, you couldn't even access.
yeah. It
You know,
it's
I mean, it may sound a little extreme as I'm saying it, but it actually allowed people to feel proud of like what they're doing, so they became confident, so they could go and fight for this change.
you know they did a phenomenal job redefining the role of marketing, but we've also created a monster at the same time. So the monster that we created, and this is what I've talked about on LinkedIn a few times, and I'll probably do maybe a more in-depth analysis of this and show it to be true, which is that for the most part, I would say when I've asked this in a room, I said, how many of you have actually clicked on an ad recently, a digital ad? How many of you have opened an unsolicited cold email that you never asked for? There's all these topics about how you can create a better subject line and get people to. This is entirely wrong. You're starting with demand gen. You haven't earned the right to execute demand gen. You need to be recognized as a thought leader first, and that's a different set of what I would call in the book, what I call in my book, market engineering. A lot of people can engineer a product. All the tech companies I've ever been involved in, either my own teams or ones I've invested in, have built a product. And it may have taken longer to build, maybe more capital, but they were successful. It doesn't mean that all the companies were successful. The issue is that if you don't invest in market engineering, thought leadership, category creation, positioning, messaging, and storytelling, those are the 5 tenets of what I call market engineering. If you don't do that first, and you create a new category and install yourself as the category queen or king or whatever you want to call it, and as a recognized thought leader, no one's opening your email. No one's going to call you. Once you do, though, which is why when Tom asked me to build a new category called Enterprise AI for C3, I went about thought leadership work with him, a book, different TV shows, different Tom. I have a great asset, right? I mean, it's hard when you're not that person, but he wasn't that person at one point, and neither was Mark Benioff, and neither were a lot of other people. When you have smart things to say, and you're giving people practical, pragmatic, and actionable advice, they'll listen to you. So your job is to get in front of that, and you need to demand that the PR team that you work with or you need to go to a conference and weasel your way into a keynote. You have to have smart things to say that cause people to think provocatively, and so we began a strategy to build the enterprise AI category. We did it digitally. By taking a ton of content, unpacking that content that was all in PDFs and turning it into HTML that could be scanned by Google. So that way we got credit in the form of first page organic searches. And we began to use the term enterprise AI over and over and over again. It wasn't used at all. When I first checked it, I think it was like one company that had been using it. There was a digital online newspaper called Enterprise AI. That was about it. Very little. Now, Enterprise AI is all over there. And as a result, we were getting 3,500 inbounds a month without any outbound email, no SDRs, nothing. In fact, we couldn't serve all of the inbounds. That was an issue, and we ended up fixing that. But most startups and most existing companies have this problem. They want to lead with demand gen because it's an action, right? It's something, it's an action they can take and they can show, look how many emails we sent out. Look how many phone calls that we made. And look how much capital you have spent to no avail. This is insane, and you're doing it wrong. You need to invest in thought leadership. And a new thing, and I'm working with a company to do this, we need to build a new category that we're calling community commerce marketing. It's not enough for you to brag about your stuff. In fact, you shouldn't. What you should have is your customers and users of your products brag about your stuff. You need to find who those people are, whether it's B2C or B2B. B2B is just committee decisions. B2C, it's an individual decision. And you need to find those people, identify those people, engage them, activate them on your behalf, and even monetize that through and pay them for being an advocate and a raving fan of what you do. If you follow Jeffrey Moore, he was a partner of mine at Wildcat, Crossing the Chasm. Pretty smart guy. He would say that if you want to cross the chasm, you need references. Well, today we need digital references, and we need lots of them, and we to be able to prove to people. So I think the transition for marketing, for go-to-market, is not about screaming via email and outbound cold calls, et cetera. It's a cacophony out there of people trying to grab your attention. Instead, we need to work on thought leadership, these market engineering concepts. Invest in that first. The scary part, it takes 12, 18 months to build a new category, to build up that credibility. And a lot of the venture community is not tolerant. They want to see immediate results. They want to see, how much revenue have we added? My argument is we need to keep the burn rate down significantly from the go-to-market side. It doesn't cost a lot to do these things. It takes a lot of internal effort to do them. You need the entire team. It's not on the marketer's shoulders to create a new category. It's actually the CEO and the rest of the management team. They need to engage and help you build it. The marketer can help you activate it. They can take on duties, tasks to help get it done, but they're just a member of that overall team that's building the new category. And to delegate that, or to actually not just delegate it, but to make it the objective of the marketer, is insane. That's not going to work. And I think as we take a look at the evolution of marketing, I think we need to move to this community commerce marketing where we have raving fans. We need to work towards category creation and thought leadership. And we need to overall recognize that it's not an overnight thing. It takes 12, 18 months. And you can see, if you want a metric to watch, you can use Google tools, or you can buy an SEO, SEM product if you want. Pick your favorite. I won't mention any names. But you can actually see how many people are organically searching for either the name of your company or those terms. And they need to be interesting new terms. So, for example, enterprise AI was the one that we came up with, CRM at Siebel, customer relationship management. You need to come up with an interesting category name that others can participate in, not you alone, but others can participate in to help you build it. And then you need to use community commerce marketing to help people advocate on your behalf why you're the best company in that particular new category. So I think this is the transition. It's not just about a chat GPT and generating content. It's about becoming a thought leader and a recognized in an industry for being provocative and interesting and smart about what the category that you're trying to build is all about.
Okay, this is probably the third podcast that we're about to do this on, right? We're like, to be respectful of people's time, like we have to cut the podcast, but we have to bring you back on, Bruce. Kelly, did you have a question? Do you want to ask?
I just have one question, because I think that approach is 100% spot on. I used to be a partner at a branding agency, so saw this a lot. But one thing you're saying that I want to ask about is, are you suggesting every company needs to create its own product category?
I don't think they need to create their own product category per se. I think they do need to create a category or redefine an existing category. So if you've come up with a new widget that's a better widget that fits into a category that has previously been built, I think it's incumbent upon you to be able to redefine the attributes of the category. If you don't, you're going to get crushed by the category leader in that category. Why? Well, because they define the rules, right? They're the ones who they built it, or they were part of it. I mean, I think about Salesforce today. We ceded CRM to Salesforce. Oracle really didn't do much with that. Random thoughts of CRM-ness, I guess, but not a lot. And Mark did a phenomenal job, of redefining that, not CRM, but cloud CRM, right? We had a small cloud thing, but it wasn't what we were talking, multi-tenant, what we know is cloud computing today. Mark invented cloud computing and then just decided to apply it against CRM and some other areas. he did not go into enterprise CRM initially. That we own that. In fact, I think Siebel is still the largest provider of call center technology.
Yes.
I don't think that they've lost that. So he would have gotten crushed if he tried to go in and sell enterprise CRM. Instead, he goes, that's really expensive stuff that Siebel's selling. We have a much easier way for you to get your sales team. Aren't you tired of getting dominated by those IT people who have to make all the changes to your CRM? Wouldn't you like just to run it yourself? So they went in and sold to small teams and small companies. I mean, he's brilliant. He did a phenomenal job here. And it's very tough for us as enterprise CRM, and all of our revenue was predicated on, a one-time license deal plus maintenance. Right? Mark goes, we're not doing that. We have a whole different business model. So really, really tough for people to compete against that. So your answer is no, I don't think you need to. I don't think everybody has to have a new category, but I do think that they need to have something to say about redefining. If they're going to go into an existing one, I think they should redefine what it means to be that, and then force the incumbent to have to respond to that new definition.
Super. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll share one thing with Bruce because he was kind enough to share with us the community commerce marketing. I think it's super fascinating as a concept as you're talking about it. I'll share what I think is also happening is like the communities as they evolve into community 2.0, 2.3, actually have to start thinking about themselves as platform for success because they're the weight that they carry or the duty that they have to perform is actually like get people to a destination. And if you think about it, there's a platform for sales called CRM. We talked a lot about it. We talked a little bit about the platform marketing, which is marketing automation. But I think as communities become their second version or third version, they start to have to think about like all the different things that they do for people. So this, I'm looking forward to it. If you're okay with it, we'll bring you back on the show because I think everything that we talked about in this podcast is enough for people to digest too. But again, thank you so much for spending time with us, and this has been phenomenal. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I enjoyed it and be happy to. I have opinions on lots of things. Whether they're right, people can debate.
That's what the show is all about. That's really what the show is all about. So thank you for being very kind with your time.
Thank you for listening to Unlearn. Subscribe wherever you listen and visit unlearnpodcast.com for the transcripts.